Hello, everyone. Charles Watts here, joined, of course, by James Benge, which means it is Inside Arsenal Extra Time. James, how's it going, mate? Having a good week?
It's rubbish. Everything
Rubbish.
is rubbish. Everything is rubbish. We have just been watching England's latest pitiful attempts to bat for 50 overs would be progress. I think it'd be very funny, wouldn't it, if this goes live and um, David Willey has taken a sort of six for, and England have somehow beaten Sri Lanka, and yet I fear this is the end for England's World Cup defence. I was saying to you off air, the most pitiful since, maybe even more pitiful than Spain in 2014.
Yep. It's totally and utterly embarrassing. I flew into Germany at the weekend because I was talking at the Frankfurt Book Fair, and I arrived
Don't
about...
tell me the Germans were mugging us off about
They
cricket.
weren't, no. But I arrived about 10 in the morning at my hotel because I got a morning flight, and I couldn't check in until 3 p.m. And they wouldn't let me check in as well. I was like, oh, come on, can you just let me in a little bit earlier? And no, room's not ready till 3. And so I basically spent 5 hours walking around the mall over the road in Frankfurt, listening to England versus South Africa, and just getting more and more annoyed at how dreadfully bad we are. I mean, it's honestly, it's got to be the worst World Cup defence, like you said. In cricket terms, I can't think of one. I'm sure there might be, but it's so pitiful. But yeah, this one was embarrassing. I thought Adil Rashid's wicket was pretty much the last thing I saw before coming up to do this. Summed up the entire World Cup campaign for England. It's just awful. Yeah, really, really bad. So aside from cricket, how's the week been? All good? I mean, enjoying the Champions League?
I really did. I thought we had two intriguing rounds of games. Obviously, that Arsenal match, great result. I think to an extent, we're also used to sort of seeing Arsenal steamroller opposition in the Premier League, and you don't think of Sevilla as being that good, but it's Champions League, it's different. And anytime you go to a stadium like that against wily old operators like Rakitic, Ramos, coming away from there with 3 points is brilliant result, I have to say.
Yeah, really good. We'll speak about that a bit later on in this episode. Definitely worth touching on that as well. I agree. I thought it was a really good result that certainly put Arsenal in control of that Champions League group. Yeah, there were some interesting games. I thought Dortmund, good result for Dortmund yesterday at Newcastle. That group is wide open. Man United obviously having some late drama with Onana actually stepping up and doing something of note for the first time probably since he's arrived at the club. Yeah, no, I thought it was an interesting week. It's just quite nice, actually. I said it on my show this morning. It's Thursday, and it's quite nice to think that's European action over for the week. Of course, it's not, but what's going on between now and this evening just really doesn't matter for the first time in years. That's a really nice feeling that we don't have to worry about European football on a Thursday night.
Yeah, I do. I really would like Liverpool to get knocked out because, for purely professional reasons, they are by far and away the biggest team in the Europa League. And as much as I sort of venerate the Europa League, if there's no big teams in it, I can get away with not paying attention professionally. So the other thing would be Liverpool, could you just steamroll your group, get qualified so that I can say to my editors and everyone, there's no story in Liverpool tonight because I'm not looking forward to watching them against Toulouse. Lucky you get to spend your Thursday evening doing much more enjoyable things, I'm sure.
Do you know what I'm doing tonight? I am going to Blenheim Palace to take my kids around the Halloween trail, starting at 6 p.m. this evening. And yeah, so they're getting dressed up. I'm not getting dressed up, but they are getting dressed up. My daughter is going as a zombie cheerleader, and my son is going as, what's he dressing up as? Who's the who's the old guy with a scythe?
Death.
Yeah, there's another word. Grim Reaper, isn't it?
Grim Reaper, yeah.
He is going as a Grim Reaper. But it's a weird Grim Reaper because he's got a mask and he's got red eyes in it. He actually genuinely looks scary. He looks like some sort of weird... It's like a mixture between a Grim Reaper and something out of Star Wars. And he does actually look genuinely quite freaky.
Sounds like the Emperor, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of like an more evil version, looking version of the Emperor. So, yeah, that's my Thursday night. Yeah, yesterday I was at Legoland all day. Tonight I'm at Blenheim Palace Halloween Trail. Tomorrow I'm at Odds Farm picking pumpkins with them. The joys of half term.
Half term sounds sensational. Like, I mean, not just for the kids, but for Charles Watts as well. What a week!
I know, what a week.
Do they get a fortnight, or are they? Is that
no,
only
thankfully
get a fortnight?
Thankfully, it is just 1 week. And it's 1 week of half term, and then we head towards the madness that is Christmas.
Oh God!
Of course. All right, let's start talking about football, shall we? And more importantly, talking about Arsenal. We'll look ahead to this weekend. Sheffield United. Oh, actually, quickly, before we do that, what did you make of the Chelsea result? Because we haven't touched, and we'll keep this really, really short. But I was watching this in Frankfurt, in a pub in Frankfurt by the train station with Felix, very nice German Arsenal fan that I met, and we had good fun watching that game. Yeah, it was a weird game, wasn't it? Really weird game. I think it was a good result for Arsenal in the end. Obviously, didn't play well to get a result the way they did. Come back 2 late-ish goals. Decent enough result. I don't think you can complain too much about that.
Yeah, completely agree with you. I think the only thing I'm glad no one's mentioned it because it would sound like excuse making. I have this silly theory that the horrendous nature of the pitch really sort of set Arsenal just off on the wrong course. I mean, in those first 10 minutes, it was like the ball couldn't roll. That was how bad the rain was. That, I'm not saying Chelsea did anything in that regard. It's a good result. It's a stupid game. I think almost one to like kind of throw in the dustbin of history is like, yeah, you're happy with the point there, but you can't read too much into it. It was weird. And everyone, Odegaard, Jesus, even for a long time, Saka, when you have that many players that seem just completely off it, Zinchenko, you just think, forget about that. Although maybe with Odegaard, you shouldn't be forgetting about it. I don't know.
It was a weird game. It was one I tweeted afterwards. I was like, it's just one of those games you just take the point and run after a performance like that and the way the game panned out. And ultimately at the end of the season, it might end up being a very, very good point for Arsenal. So Sheffield United this weekend, it's just one of those games. I mean, Arsenal had a difficult start to the season, I think. When you look at the fact they're unbeaten at the moment, they haven't played at their best, you would say, and they've played some, played United, played City, played Spurs, played Chelsea away. It's been a relatively tough start fixtures wise. So you kind of look at this one this weekend, an opportunity for Arsenal really to maybe lay down a bit of a marker for the first time this season. I mean, they went to Bournemouth 1-4-0. They did it then. It was a nice, comfortable afternoon, a rare one so far this season. You kind of look at this game as another chance to have one of those kind of afternoons. And I think it'd be quite important as well for Arsenal to, put in a bit of performance, win this game fairly comfortably and show that they can, sort of take teams to the cleaners when they need to.
Yeah. I mean, we have to contextualize the opponent here. This isn't just a bottom of the Premier League after 9 games team. This is a team that sort of is tracking to be one of the worst in Premier League history. And, that's not the fault of Sheffield United fans. And obviously there's all sorts of confusion with the ownership there. But look, they are giving up levels of shots, levels of expected goals that I don't have in my data set. I don't have a team that's anywhere near as bad as Sheffield United have been, including Luton, including Bournemouth. And I think against those teams, you do need to start thinking about things like goal difference, spreading the goals, getting your players back in form, getting Odegaard involved and finding the net. You have to think of it as an opportunity. And of course, Arteta can't say this, but you have to think of it as a different sort of opportunity, an opportunity to really get some goals in this team, get the crowd bouncing because you've paddled them 3-4, 5-0. And that should be the aim and the expectation. And I think, people say there's no easy games in the Premier League. There's one, I think, at least. And I think Arsenal should be going into this aiming for a heavy win. I cannot wait to see that get clipped up when they lose 1-0.
Pretty remarkable, really, when you say all that. The fact that Tottenham, who are top of the table, were basically 1-0 down against Sheffield United at home after 96 minutes. I didn't watch that game, obviously, so I don't know how it all panned out. But given how bad Sheffield United have been, it's pretty mad that they got themselves in that position where they were winning 1-0 at Spurs deep into stoppage time before those last few minutes. It'd be interesting to see what sort of team selection Mikel goes for in this game. Obviously, there are a couple of injury issues that are going on at the moment. Gabriel Jesus, we understand, having his scan today. Simon Collins just reported that from the Standard after that hamstring issue. You would imagine, even if, as Jesus himself suggested after the game on Tuesday night, that it wasn't too bad, it's still a hamstring issue. I can't imagine he'll be playing this weekend, but we'll wait and see. Thomas Partey, my understanding, he's not going to be playing this weekend. I don't think there's too much concern from Partey's camp that it's a potential 6-weeker, but I think from what I understand, he's definitely not going to play this weekend. We'll have to wait and see on that. But that's the information that I'm getting. So there's going to have to be some changes made for this one. When you sort of look at the team that Mikel could be put now, what do you want to see, and what sort of things does he have to take into account given the game in midweek at Sevilla, and then what they've got coming up in the next week, which is obviously a game at West Ham in the Carabao Cup, and then a really tough looking trip to Newcastle the following Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, the eyes can't help but sort of drift a little bit to Newcastle, but you do at least have the advantage that everyone's going to rotate in the Carabao Cup. I'm sure we will see minutes there for the likes of, your Smith Rowes, Kiviors. Actually, there's not that many players when you run Ramsdale. There's not that many players when you run down the list that you're like, they haven't really got chances. I think you would say Smith Rowe, Nelson. I think it's time to start blooding those players a little bit, but maybe not for this game against Sheffield United, just because I think there's going to be value in trying to build some repetitions of as much of your strongest 11 as you can get out there. So the intriguing positions for me then are that left central midfield position, and I suppose interlinked to that is striker. Like, I agree with you. I think even if Gabriel Jesus is, unless he's anything other than 100% fit, if he's 98% fit, just what's the point of risking it? You could always have him on the bench.
Mm-hmm.
So the question then becomes, and want to know your take on this. Given the impressive performances off the bench in the role, do we want to see more of Kai Havertz as that centre forward, or do we want to kind of use this as an opportunity to see what he can do in that left central midfield role, which I know he's been working on more in training, and he will need game time to test it out, and what better games than ones like this one. I mean, the alternatives, maybe you have like a Vieira on the left. I don't really see the value of Jorginho, Rice, Odegaard. So could you play Rice deep with Vieira, Smith Rowe? But personally, I think this is a game to have Havertz and Nketiah. What about you?
Yeah, see, I'm kind of leaning more towards Havertz playing as the 9 in this one if there's no Jesus. But because I think it's going to be a real, what Sheffield United are going to do. They're going to camp everyone in and around the edge of the penalty area, 2 banks of probably 5, and maybe having that more sort of focal point of Havertz up there might work out. I was talking about this in my show that I did in the morning, and I kind of like the idea of Smith Rowe playing in this game. I agree with you. I don't think there's a need for Jorginho and Rice in this game. I'd be playing Rice as a 6 and then having someone in that left 8 role. It kind of looks like that Emil may have sort of moved ahead of Vieira a little bit at the moment in the pecking order, which is really interesting. I mean, Vieira wasn't even in the squad against Chelsea. Smith Rowe was he the first sub on or the second sub after there was Tommy came on half time, didn't he?
Yeah.
Came on it, ahead of Havertz in that game.
I thought that.
And it's interesting. There seems to be a tiny little bit of a shift. I don't know why that would be, because it looked like Vieira was absolutely playing his way into the shout of being in the starting 11 on a regular basis earlier on in the season. So, and just the way that the game's going to pan out, I would expect. I kind of like the idea of having Smith Rowe in and around there, sort of making those runs in those little flicks around the corners, the kind of one-touch passes, that type passing. It might work against Sheffield United. I don't think he'll do it, but the way I kind of look at it, I think that might be a good little move. And then you have Havertz as a 9. Obviously with Saka and Martinelli either side, and then Odegaard and Smith Rowe sort of floating in and around there. But I imagine it will probably be Eddie, and like you said, Havertz playing as that 8. But yeah, I look at this one and think, if you're gonna give someone like Smith Rowe minutes in the Premier League, then this is surely a real opportunity to do that. If he's not going to get minutes now, again, you're into that question of when is he or anyone else kind of going to get minutes into sharing this, sort of sharing the burden around.
That's really interesting. I have to say, I hadn't even quite twigged, but you are right that it does feel like Smith Rowe has taken a step forward. I mean, I think the thing we always say about him is when he does get extended minutes, he plays quite nicely, and I thought he had a good cameo off the bench against Chelsea, didn't he? And like, you make a really interesting point. I think there are various ways you can sort of think about how you deal with a low block like Sheffield United. And Havertz, I like the physicality, although frankly, he doesn't always deploy it as effectively as he could.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always quite a big proponent of having an Nketiah on the pitch in a game like this because he has that thing that you can't coach or you can hone, but you can't teach someone. The ball just drops to him in crowded penalty areas. That happens a lot. And I think you tend to see, I mean, wasn't it against Fulham? Was it Forest? They did the same thing, didn't they? Flooded the box, and Nketiah still found that one opening and took it really nicely. But Smith Rowe, he's the player that can, probably more than anyone in the squad, in central areas, can take 2-3 players out of the game with his movement, his give and go, his dribbles. So you have absolutely taught me around to, I think I'd want to make room for Smith Rowe in that team. And yeah, go on. I'll do Smith Rowe and Havertz up top, because if I need someone for the ball to drop to, then I can always bring Eddie on, can't I, late on? But like you, Arteta just really likes Nketiah. I think we always look for a more complex explanation than the most simple one, which is Nketiah trains hard every single week, works hard, does his all for the team in games, even if sometimes it frustrates fans that they don't see as much interplay and as much cutting edge. But that's what Arteta likes, Nketiah, and so I'd be surprised if he doesn't feature.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Although I didn't think his cameo against Sevilla was great at all by any means. When he came on, just wanted on Thomas. It's another injury to Thomas Partey, which is, it's a great shame for Arsenal. It's a great shame for him. Obviously, he's just come back from the injury. Immediately went away for 2 friendlies for Ghana. I just look at that decision. I don't blame him. I suppose he gets called up, but just from a Ghana point of view, was it really worth taking him over for those 2 games in a friendly? They weren't qualifiers or anything like that. It was taking him all the way over to America. He just played 5 minutes or 10 minutes back from injury. It just felt like maybe that a more sensible decision could have been made there. It's not like they need to see Thomas Partey to find out what he's about or anything like that. They know exactly what he's about. And it just felt like a little bit too much to me to take him over there. And now obviously he's come back and he's picked up an injury straight away. Again, whether it's linked, I mean, who knows? I don't know. It probably isn't. But still, just sort of looking at it sort of subjectively as it stands now, it just feels like, did he really need to go through that? Would it not have been better just to stay back in England for those 2 weeks and to continue and then, go and link up with Ghana in the next international break in November? And hopefully, he would have been much more stronger. Obviously, that hasn't happened now. It's all hypothetical anyway. But it's just another injury. It's more sort of fuel to the fire about Thomas Partey and his injury issues and whether Arsenal need to really make a big decision on him. There's been lots of talk about that. I've had lots of questions and comments. I had someone here who's obviously sort of from the other side of it. He said, look, why not look at the Partey stats from last season? He played 33 Premier League games. That is not injury prone. He's played more games than half the squad in the past 3 years. His injury record is overblown because of how much we miss him when he's out. I don't agree that his injury record is overblown because of how much we miss him. I think his injury record is there to be seen and has been since he's arrived at the club. It's an ongoing theme and, there's no getting away from that. And it is just frustrating. I think mainly, and that point sort of points to it there, that in that comment, that he is so important. He does bring so much to the team when he's fit that it does feel like such a big absence constantly when this keeps happening. But yeah, it's a really, really frustrating one. Like I said, he's definitely, from what I hear, he's not going to be involved this weekend, and that would certainly put his place, you would imagine, in doubt for a huge game at Newcastle the following week, which I would have loved to have seen Thomas Partey playing in, and that is a big blow.
I mean, that is that you would say in theory, and if I'd said to you sort of 2 weeks before the season began, who would line up in midfield for that sort of game, Partey and Rice would be undebatable. To briefly sort of, I thought you made a really good point there on Ghana, and if I were Chris Hughton, as much as there is value in having Partey around and getting him engaged before the Africa Cup of Nations, let's be frank. Look at his injury record. What you need to start doing as a national team manager is thinking about how do we play if Partey is injured before AFCON? Like, what's our plan B? Because you need to get. I mean, I'm just looking here at sort of minutes Arsenal have got out of players. I mean, it is interesting that point your comment to make, because let me count these at 1, 2, 3. He's played the 7th most Premier League minutes for Arsenal since the start of the 2020 to 21 season. So I know that is a little bit skewed. Can I group those by season? A little bit skewed based on the fact he's been there 7. He's been in the squads for all those seasons, and a Gabriel Jesus hasn't. 7th doesn't feel too bad, but I mean, I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but I bet you if I did cities and sort of divided them,
on that,
Rodri would be number 1.
Let me just bring this up for you, and that might explain that. Look at this.
Yeah.
Saka, Martinelli, and Thomas Partey, the only players in the current Arsenal squad who started against Sheffield United the last time the two sides met in April 21. That is pretty remarkable stat there, and shows how new this team is and how many changes there have been in such a short space of time at Arsenal. And the team, less than 4 years ago, has changed that much. And so it doesn't surprise me really that he's 7th, or as high up as 7th. But I don't think that's necessarily because he's played a lot of minutes, more minutes than we think. I think it's just because there's not many players at Arsenal who've been there that long.
So I guess the other good way of putting this is he arrived, I don't know, a few weeks after Gabriel, but he arrived in the same summer as Gabriel, and both of them play critical positions for the squad, the sort where you go, gosh, we want him to play 35 out of 38 games this season. Gabriel, since arriving, has played 9,040 minutes, second to, of course, Bukayo Saka. Thomas Partey's played 6,301. So you're getting almost a third less football out of Partey than you are out of Gabriel. It's a problem, and it's not getting better. Like, the biggest predictor of future injuries is past injuries. And I think given Partey's age, as much as we sort of thought, it's him, as long as he wants that reserve role behind Rice, that's fine. I think you need to sort of wonder about, do Arsenal need someone that can step in for him? Jorginho's there, I know. But, do you need to think about succession planning for Partey? And maybe a player that also does some of those things that Partey doesn't do as well, playing as an inverted right back and a midfielder. Because look, like, it's going to come to mid-February, and how many minutes will Partey have got? Because you're going to be careful managing him through Christmas. He's going to be gone at AFCON. Maybe the plus side of this is come April, May, he'll have played so little Premier League football that he won't actually be injured for once. But it's hard to keep your patience with a player that has been missing so many Aprils and Mays when Arsenal have really needed him, and that's not necessarily his fault.
Real shame. It's a real shame because he's such a good player and he's so important. And hopefully this isn't going to be a long one, and he will come back and he will still make a big impact, because I still think he can make a big impact on this season if he can get fit. And I love the thought of that midfield three of Odegaard, Rice, and Partey at times, and it's just a real shame we haven't really been able to see it enough. Interesting debate, actually. Quickly, I'm going to go back to that stat on that Sheffield United game in a minute, but a player who's been coming
asked me to name that team, are you?
Oh, well, I might well be. No looking before that. Takehiro Tomiyasu was brilliant. I spoke about him on today's show, and there's been lots of debate about sort of now, given his performance, who's better, Tomiyasu or Zinchenko, and it's just an open debate, obviously. But I thought he was brilliant at the weekend. But there's been quite a few people who have been mentioning this. Why don't we see Zinchenko as a left 8? Why did it have to be one or the other at left back? Why can't Tomiyasu at times be playing as left back and then allow Zinchenko to move further forward and actually play as a left 8, where we see him play in midfield for Ukraine very, very well lots of times? But it just seems to be something that Mikel doesn't really go for. I don't think we've seen him try it yet. And I remember when he signed, I thought it was something we were going to see a lot. And in fact, I remember at the time, I thought, he's probably been signed to play in that position rather than at left back. And yet we haven't seen it. So what do you reckon the reason is that Mikel just doesn't really see that as an option?
I am a little bit flummoxed. I suppose the logic is he will always want the player who plays at left back, especially when Ben White is at right back. He'll always want that player to invert. And wasn't it weird seeing Tommy, who I think in Arsenal circles, we kind of got used to seeing him as that. He was the pre Ben White, wasn't he? He was the guy that you would see maybe sort of whipping in the crosses from deep, but he was very good at holding position and making that back three. And then you sort of look up in Sevilla, and you're like, is that Tomiyasu right in the penalty? I mean, he's getting more advanced than Jorginho at times. And actually, the thing I like most about him is his best performances last season were like he was the left back stopper, wasn't he? You've got Mohamed Salah, or you've got a right winger who's really strong on their left foot. Stick Tomiyasu there. You'll basically play a flat back four, and we're not really going to have anyone invert into midfield. But Tomiyasu does that pretty well now. He did that, and every time he comes in at left back, I think he's good inverted left back. I'm talking about Tomiyasu all the time because I have no earthly idea why we haven't even seen Zinchenko as a left 8, because he ticks every box. I mean, he is maybe the most obvious sort of upgrade for Granit Xhaka out of all the players in the squad. He's okay defensively, but he makes smart runs. He's good in possession. I think the thing I would say about that role is it's really an off-ball role. You don't carry the ball a lot. Possession doesn't come to you a lot. And of course, all of Zinchenko's greatest qualities are what he does on the ball, not off it. Maybe that. It seems perverse not to take a look at it, though. And I think that's where I fall down on. I'm sure it sounds like you're the same.
Yeah, no, I am. I do wonder if he wants that left 8 role to be. Actually, no, I'm talking myself out of that argument already, because I just thought he's played Vieira there. I was going to say maybe he wants a bit more of a physical, or a player with a bit more stature in that role, like we saw with Granit, and Havertz obviously has been brought in to potentially try and do that as well. But then he has played Vieira there, and he's certainly not got much about him in terms of stature and physicality. So I've kind of taught myself out of it. I don't really understand why. I think, like you, we see him do it on the international stage and do it very, very well. And it feels like he would be a good option, but for whatever reason, it's just not something that Mikel has gone for. I'd be playing for Zinchenko this weekend, I have to say, though. And I thought Tommy was brilliant against Sevilla, and I'd 100% be starting him against Newcastle next week at St James's Park. But for this game at home to Sheffield United, knowing how this game is going to pan out, or certainly expecting how this game is going to pan out, for me, it's that's the game for Zinchenko at left back. You don't really need Tomiyasu there. But yeah, 100% against Newcastle, he starts for me.
Indisputably, completely agree with you. And what a blessed relief it is to have those two. With Tomiyasu, by all accounts, I've never not asked the question on his contractual situation, so I don't know what his sort of long-term view of his future at Arsenal is. But I think he is really settled in this role where he knows he will get a lot of minutes, but they might come at centre back, they might come at right back, they might come at left back. I think he understands how much Mikel Arteta values him, even if that's not always reflected in being sort of penciled into the best 11. And it's brilliant seeing him back. I think he was the player that he was a sort of underrated cult hero of the rise of this Arteta team. And I think everyone worried, everyone wanted it to be better for him last season. And just a great guy, always good in the mix zone, which, as you know, I consider a key criteria in Arsenal players. And I do want to get him in the mix zone now, because it's got to the stage where we kind of want to say, Tommy, do you think you should be next in the on the contract carousel? Get him signed up, Mikel.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'll be keeping him. I've been surprised at how many questions I had over the last sort of 6 months or so. People saying, "What do you think we should do with Tomiyasu? Do you think we should probably cash in on him?" It's like, no. Why would you want to cash in on Tomiyasu? He's absolutely the 12th man of this team. Whether there's a debate, should he be starting? Should he be in that regular starting 11? There's a very understandable debate on that. But I think, like you say, he is pretty much the first sub on every single time. He's not a bit part player. He is an absolutely crucial member of this team. And he plays a lot of minutes and will continue to play a lot of minutes. And there's lots of talk about what happened with Saliba at the end of last season and what that injury meant to Arsenal's season. But there is a very big shout that the Tomiyasu injury as well was, if not as important, very close to being as important, coming on the back of Saliba's one as well. Had he been fit while Saliba had been out, I'm not sure Arsenal's season would have ended the way it did last season. I think they would have been a hell of a lot stronger with Tommy in that. Right. I'm going back to this now.
Oh God.
Bit of a quiz time for you. And I've not, for those watching and listening, I've not given him a heads up on this because I was really interested. I tried to do it myself without actually looking at the team, and I failed so miserably. And I was at this game. I remember it very well.
Is this the home game?
No, it was 3-0 at Bramall Lane.
No memory of this game for starters.
Martinelli scored.
Oh, wait a minute.
Martinelli scored, and I remember it was Zoom pressers, and I remember afterwards saying to Mikel, because I think it was Martinelli's first start in a while, and he scored, and I remember really pushing Mikel on the presser afterwards. Are you going to, does he deserve to be starting at the weekend now that he's done this? This
was in the Mikel hates Martinelli days.
Yeah, it was in the Mikel hates Martinelli that everyone was pushing.
Age like milk.
And and I remember pushing him on it. So try and name, if you can, the starting 11. I'm intrigued to see how many you get in this.
This I think says so much worrying about me. I can't remember much of the starting 11, but I can absolutely remember the shape of the pass network, because Arsenal ended up basically with these like two pod. It's the sort of start of the pods, as we now call them. So I think you have, Danny Ceballos.
Danny Ceballos did start, and that's impressive. I didn't get Danny Ceballos. Arsenal scored one of their best goals, if not the best goal of the season in this game.
Lacazette?
Yeah. Who scored that goal? Actually, Lacazette scored 2.
Yeah.
And he finished a brilliant team move that Ceballos was heavily involved in, actually. Now I remember it. It was a brilliant team move.
So I feel like I must then... one midfielder down, and I'm going to assume it's Granit Xhaka.
He did start, but he didn't start in midfield.
Oh God, he's left back.
Xhaka left back stage.
Right, 2021. Oh, that midfielder's I'm gonna have to come back to that. Right, centre backs will then.
Come on, that midfield. We've been speaking about him for the whole show.
What?
In midfield.
In midfield, Partey.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's on there. I wasn't counting him. Sacramento.
Oh, is he on the? Oh, that's me. Oh, yeah, sorry, that's my bad.
So it must be Leno in goal.
Yeah.
The thing with COVID as well is I can't. You're like, did Arsenal win the FA Cup? When was Martinez there? So Leno in goal.
This defense is spectacular, by the way.
Cedric.
No.
Okay, Rob Holding.
Yeah.
Pablo Mari.
Yes.
No, he's
the unbelievably handsome Pablo Mari.
Again, like COVID, I'm like, he got injured against City then, and no, that was 9 months before. Pablo Mari Holding. Right back. So we've got Xhaka left back. Right back is Ainsley Maitland-Niles.
No, now plays
he's
for
out on
Villa.
loan then. Oh, Callum Chambers.
Callum Chambers. What a back four. What a back four that is. Xhaka, Murray, Holding, Chambers.
So,
so I'm short in midfield.
I'm short one midfielder.
Well, no, it was a kind of 4-2-3-1 formation, really. Actually,
Erdegaard. Oh no, wait, obviously not.
No, we had the formation I'm looking at had
Willian.
Xhaka listed as a number 10.
Is it? So it must be Willian then.
No. Club record signing at that time.
Pepe.
Yeah.
I just couldn't. I was like, yeah, how can he be in that team with Saka and?
That was the team. It was Leno, Xhaka, Mari, Holding, Chambers, Partey, Ceballos, Martinelli, Saka, Pepe, and Lacazette. And that was April 2021.
At the club. So that's the only current players at the club.
Yeah,
who started that game
in the current Arsenal squad? Who started that game? The subs, I think, who came on. Willian came on in that. I did look at it. Who else came on? Willian Elneny and Nketiah came on. Other subs included Matt Ryan, Hector Bellerin, Miguel Aziz was on the bench, Reece Nelson, Cedric Suarez. So yeah.
I mean, I don't want to dive too deep into things that really won't interest our viewers, but as you will well know, there are moments when a sort of there are moments when people around Arsenal get very annoyed at us because we ask for, we're always asking about transfers and all that. And I've never known anyone at Arsenal as smug as when they got the Matt Ryan deal all the way through to announcement and no one knew about it.
Yeah.
I mean, they were picking up the phone, like laughing their heads off that none of us saw it coming. So, I mean, and Fabio Vieira as well, they were quite smug that was basically like a done deal by the time we found out about it. But Matt Ryan, I think, is a place in Arsenal media folklore for that reason alone.
It does indeed. I remember that very, very well. So big changes. And hopefully 3-0 win, though. Hopefully we can repeat that. That's this weekend. I'd take that all day long. Right. Let's sort of look backwards now, having been looking forward, and just go back to Tuesday night. What were your thoughts on this game? I mean, we touched about it at the very, very start, and it was a really good result in a place where it's not easy to win. There was a few good individual performances. Gabriel Jesus. I mean, what did you prefer, Gabriel Jesus' goal or Gabriel Jesus'
assist? Oh, the assist was amazing.
That was so good. It was one of those classic moments as well when he played the ball through and there was literally about 10 seconds to wait to see if this was going to end up as a goal or not. And I sort of started off probably about 10 foot from the TV. And by the time Martinelli had actually rolled it in, I was about 1 foot away from the TV. Because you're getting closer and closer as he's getting closer towards the goal. It was like, come on. And it was a brilliant
It's the way that Martinelli gets so far clear of Sergio Ramos that he has time to then slow down and round the keeper. It was beautiful, beautiful pass, beautiful goal, beautiful performance by both of them. I had Martinelli. I had Jesus in my team of the week until Evan Nielsen of Porto scored a hat-trick in the second half because it seemed churlish to then take him out. But Martinelli actually was possibly my man of the match, and he was in my team because I thought his defensive work was sensational again. And you well know that's what Arteta loves about Martinelli. Of course, he values the goals. He values the creativity, the ability to beat a fullback. But when Martinelli is sprinting down the other end, Mikel Arteta's heart just raises.
Yeah, I only gave Martinelli a 7 in my player ratings, and I got a lot of grief for that. I think I definitely marked him down, judging by the reaction that I got and what you're saying there. I obviously didn't notice that brilliant defensive work as much, but I thought he did really well. And
I think you might just take it for granted, though. I think that might be it. Sometimes, you watch Saka and Martinelli, and you don't. You sort of go, actually, I don't see Mo Salah doing that. I don't see Marcus Rashford doing that, for one.
Definitely don't see Marcus Rashford doing that. I thought he took his goal really well, considering he'd had that miss early on, and he had so much time to think about it once he'd gone through. And those are often, you always hear it. The hardest chances for a forward because you're just thinking and you're waiting to see what the goalkeeper's going to do. And you don't see people going around the goalkeeper very often anymore. Like you'd see Henry do it all the time, right? You'd do it all the time back in the day. But you just don't really see it that much. It's always like the little dink or something like that now, or try and get him through the legs. You rarely see him actually go around the keeper, and I loved that finish. I thought it was really, really good. And Jesus' second goal was exceptional as well. The sort of skill to work himself into the position to shoot, and then the finish is brilliant. I mean, he is a Champions League machine. His goal scoring record in the Champions League, he could sort of take that over to the Premier League and do that and score at that sort of rate in the Premier League. It'd be absolutely brilliant. And such a shame he's gone off with this injury now. Obviously, he hopes it's not that bad. He said afterwards that he didn't think it'd be too much. We'll wait to see what. Well, saying that, I was going to say we'll wait to see what Mikel says in his presser tomorrow. But
no,
Mikel's probably not going to say anything in his presser tomorrow about it. But it's a real shame. Hopefully, it's nothing too serious because. They're just a better team, Arsenal. Whatever your thoughts on Gabriel Jesus, on does he score enough goals? Is he the striker Arsenal need to really go to the next level? Whatever your thoughts on that. The absolute fact is, and there's no getting away from, when Jesus is in that team and playing as a number 9, they are a better team, and he makes Arsenal better. And it'd be a real shame now that if he's out for any sort of significant period of time on this injury.
You're indisputable. And I think it's the thing you have to bear in mind when you think about if you ever do want to upgrade on Jesus, you need to then find a player who, in games like this, isn't just your striker who gets loads of shots and takes his chances really well. He is the guy that creates for others. He presses as intently as anyone, and I think Arsenal's off-ball press looks much better with Ødegaard and Jesus as the two than it does with Nketiah and Ødegaard or whoever. Those all-round qualities, like Arteta will always say, he raises our ceiling, or he raises our levels.
Changed our world,
changes our
isn't it?
world. That was what I was thinking.
Yeah.
You keep thinking Arteta can't find something more glowing to say about Jesus, and he finds it. That those qualities are not sort of as readily apparent as someone that scores 20 goals, in the Premier League, and Jesus gets 17. But Jesus in your team makes it a lot easier for Martinelli to get 15, Saka to get 15. I think the worry is that it's always, there's just too many injuries. It's sort of the same thing as Partey, and Arsenal need to make sure sooner or later that they are ready, more ready than they are now, for Jesus to miss 2-3 months, because it's happened quite a lot in his Arsenal career. But I agree with you, agree with Arteta. This is a player who takes Arsenal to another level, another planet. So good is he.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I've never bought into this. Arsenal have to get an upgrade on Jesus. I don't think so. I'm very much in the camp of Arsenal need another option up front, but I don't think that's necessarily to replace Jesus in the starting 11. I think it's another option who you could, for games, put him in, leave Jesus on the bench, but then you bring Jesus back in for another game. I don't think he needs replacing. I just think he needs supporting, if you see what I mean, with another option up front that Arsenal could go to. And I think he was exceptional at the weekend, and just kind of fingers crossed now that that he is not going to be out for too long. Martin Ødegaard's performance wasn't great. He got hooked again, as he did against Chelsea. A couple of disappointing performances from him in a row. I've had a fair few sort of comments and questions about it. Some of it I think is just people going over the top. I mean, it's not that long since Martin Ødegaard's turned in some very, very good performances. Like, Bournemouth wasn't that long ago, and I know it was Bournemouth, but he was so good that day, and there's been plenty. And he wasn't great against Chelsea, he wasn't great against Sevilla.
City. He was great against City.
And so I'm not worried about Ødegaard. People are saying, he should be dropped. It's like, you can't drop him straight away for a couple of bad performances. It needs to be this run of form needs to go on far longer before you can sort of go into that. But why do you think maybe Martin? And I think it's definitely safe to say that he hasn't been at his best yet this season on a consistent basis. There's been some good performances, but why do you think we're maybe not seeing him perform as well as he potentially could do? Do you think there's factors like Partey not being fit, and maybe that right-hand side isn't quite been working as well for whatever reason as it had done before? What could you potentially put it down to?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, talk to me about dropping Ødegaard when we're well clear of 5 games of bad form. Footballers all over the world have the odd bad game here or there. I think part of it, and I think we've talked about this before, the one great strength of Partey and the way he would get Arsenal up the pitch is his taking the ball on the turn and passing to Ødegaard meant Ødegaard got this quick ball. I feel like Ødegaard's having to go and get it. I haven't seen the heat maps, but I bet you a lot of his touches are happening quite deeper. And that's only part of this midfield that has been really unsettled. One where I sort of feel like Ødegaard has gone from maybe the junior player. I know that's weird to say of a club captain, but Granit Xhaka and Thomas Partey were so experienced, and so they so imposed themselves on the roles they had that it really freed up Ødegaard to sort of do whatever he wanted within Arteta's confines. And I think now the responsibility is on Ødegaard because he's got a new signing. He's got at least one new signing next to him, maybe 2. I think early in the season, it didn't help that there was no Ben White. And I know that's what Aaron's suggesting there, isn't it? An interesting idea about switching him to the left 8. At the moment, it feels all a little bit premature. I think we're all, he scored a few great goals last season that swelled his tally, and he had a great finishing season. But he's still getting in okay spots. It's a little bit off, but for now, it just feels like the totally natural off run of form that even top footballers have. And he's still a top footballer because he was still great against City. He was great against United. He has really good games.
Yeah. And I don't buy into this
fun to
argument that
play.
he disappears in big games either. I mean, he scored at Spurs last season. He scored against United this season just after Rashford had put United in front. Really crucial goal. He stepped up and got that equaliser. Scored a couple against Chelsea last season. Yeah, he scores in big games. So I don't buy into it.
Can I say where I think that comes from? I think this is the debate the debate on football Twitter, which like we have to all acknowledge, because as journalists we're probably more on Twitter than other platforms. It does kind of influence conversation, but it's just been hijacked by stupid people. Often that sort of, fans are letting the idiot fringe of rival clubs go, oh, well, Odegaard had a bad game against us one time, so he doesn't turn up in big games. It's stupid. He's like you say, Charles, he's had so many good games in the biggest games, the North London derbies, against City, against Chelsea, where he scored twice last season. Maybe Chelsea's just not a big game at the moment because they're in mid-table. But he's not a big game player. It's just stupid.
Yeah. And I think the fact that he's playing basically in a new midfield this season has got to be taken into account. Last year, if everyone was fit, and they were a lot of the time, you had Partey, Xhaka, Odegaard. You knew exactly. And you've mentioned how experienced Partey and Xhaka are, and how kind of influential they were in that team. Suddenly he's got a completely new team. Look, Declan Rice has been brilliant, but it is still a new player to adjust to and to work up that connection with and that partnership with. And then there's been countless other players playing next to him because it seems to be chopping and changing each week. So I don't think that helps. And definitely not having Partey there to sort of split the line and get the ball to him in an advanced role would have had an impact on his performance. There's no doubt about it that he's having a drop deeper to get on the ball at times because he doesn't have that quality of pass that Partey possesses. And Partey not being in the team, I think that is such a crucial area. I've had people say, well, he's not creative enough. It's like, he's really creative. The way he plays Partey when he's on it is so creative because he just can find those passes that no one else can find from deep and find Arsenal in space, find players in space, find Odegaard in space. You can then turn and he's in the final third and can do the damage that he does. So I think there's a lot of reasons for it, but I agree with you. I just think it's far too early to suddenly start panicking and thinking, oh, Odegaard's out form. We need to drop him. We need to find a replacement. We need to do something. It's just like, no, just calm down. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Think back. Arsenal's best result, in my opinion, last season. Best result, best performance, Newcastle away last season. That was one of the most intense matches I have watched in such a long time. And I was right behind the dugouts in the press box for that game. And the intensity, the atmosphere, it was such a difficult game to win that the way they did, especially going into it on the back of some disappointing performances where you kind of knew the title had gone and they had to win that game just to keep their chances alive. Odegaard was unreal in that game. He scored again and he was absolutely brilliant. And, that was such a big game on the day for Arsenal and he did it then. So I just don't buy into the fact that he disappears in big games at all. It's just not true. It's not. And so yeah, I'm not too worried about him yet, and I'm not sure about moving him over to the left hand side yet either. I'm not sure if that will solve anything at the moment. I still think keep that right hand connection going with him, Saka and White, because it's it's so integral to Arsenal. I think when he plays well. Right, let me bring up another one I wanted to talk about. John here says, question for extra time. On watching recent matches and noting the high work rate of Martinelli, Rice, Trossard and Jesus, who do you think are the hardest working players and which players do you need to do more? And I was thinking of this before it came on. I was like, is there anyone that I would say needs to work harder in this Arsenal team? And I don't people say, oh, Havertz, but then the stats don't back that up because you see the stats in terms of distance run, challenges and all that. He's up there. Maybe he's more of a language type player. But I don't really look at this Arsenal team now and think there's one in that squad who really needs to work harder. You look at the work rate of players like Nketiah, and when he comes in, everyone puts in a shift in this Arsenal team, don't they? And if you don't, you're not in the team. It's just plain and simple because it is the number one demand from Mikel Arteta. And if you don't work hard, you are not going to get a look in this Arsenal squad.
Although, can I tell you who never looks like they're working hard, even though he clearly is William Saliba.
Oh yeah.
I'm just very conscious that nowadays you have to kind of be prepared for your words to be taken out of context. but Saliba looks like he's sort of playing like to continue the Rolls Royce metaphor. He looks like he's playing the whole game in second gear.
Mm-hmm.
But that's often. I mean, I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? Is we don't always, because we don't see them on training. We don't always know who's lagging off their best levels, and Arteta does, and we know that doing that is just immediately boom out of the squad, out of the club. There is very little patience for players that don't work hard at Arsenal, and I think to an extent that was reflected in the early years. But like you say now, it's almost hard to pick just one. But I mean, I'm always impressed by the sort of bursts of energy that like a Trossard brings when he comes off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Ben White as well, because what he has done to change his game and expand his repertoire and do everything for this team over the last 2 years is just sensational. And also when you list like the best Arsenal players, no one ever lists Ben White, so why not give him a shout out?
Mm-hmm. Does need to sort that hair out though. When Arsenal were 2-0 down at Chelsea, I was very, very ready to start a Ben White hair campaign because I was convinced that was going to curse Arsenal's season. That hair was going to curse Arsenal's season.
I like it.
How can you like that? I mean, look, Ben
White.
I tell you what. Who am I to give Ben White tips on hair when you got this monstrosity up here? But
well, that's the thing. I think Ben and I can vibe on having excellent hair. If Arsenal win the league, I would absolutely do my hair Ben White. If he makes a sufficient contribution, what I deem to be a sufficient contribution,
you should do that for your wedding and surprise.
I was going to say I'll do it now, but yeah, I'd be dead.
Yeah, that would
be not be getting down the aisle.
Okay, from one fantastic piece of hair to another. Well, actually, two very good, strong, fantastic pieces of hair there in Albert Stuivenberg and Mikel Arteta. Lots of stories doing around, emanating from Holland at the moment about Stuivenberg's future. Obviously, Ajax on the hunt for a new manager after remarkable start to the season from them. Louis van Gaal is in as an advisor at Ajax, and Louis obviously worked with Albert at Manchester United. And there's lots of stories doing around that he is advising Manchester United to go after Stuivenberg and appoint him potentially as their new manager. I mean, I haven't had this sort of backed up or anything yet, but it's definitely worth debating in case it does actually happen. Now, Arsenal lost Steve Round. It was decided Steve would go in the summer. A sort of mutual agreement. Who was one very key person in Mikel Arteta's early time at Arsenal. Stuivenberg, we all know, obviously is really, really crucial to Arsenal and Mikel. They have a great working relationship. We've seen Albert step up and do the job of Mikel when he had COVID. How big of a loss, if this were to happen? Of course, it feels like we're some way off that actually happening yet. But if it were to happen, how much of a loss could you see it being, and how much of an impact do you think it would make on Mikel?
I think it would be a lot easier to underplay its significance than to overplay its significance. And he's very clearly established as a sort of lead assistant. I think a lot of, and you'll know better than me, but I think a lot of the value that Steve Round brought was very early in Arteta's tenure as someone that has been there and done that in Premier League benches. But you always see in games how often Arteta is talking to Stuivenberg in particular about relaying tactical instructions, maybe what needs to change. Only they know what they're talking about, but it's very obvious who the man he refers to most is, and it is Albert. For that reason, of course, it would be hugely significant if he were to walk out the door. I mean, like you, I've seen the reports in the Netherlands, kind of not being able to independently verify any interest there. Is interesting. It's intriguing. He's a Feyenoord fan, I believe. I don't know how much difference that makes when you have a chance to take on one of the biggest jobs in the Netherlands. But also, if I were advising Albert, I would certainly recommend him having a long, hard think because, to put this in context, I was reading, it was either Wesley Sneijder or Raphael van der Vaart saying this is a team that needs to sort of think about whether or not it could get relegated. You do not want your managerial career to start in this sort of ultra toxic environment, which is what it looks like Ajax games are right now. I mean, they can hardly finish a game without something being hurled onto the pitch. It's a tough place, I would imagine, for a rookie head coach. I know he had a little while, didn't he? Was it Ghent or Genk, a Belgian club? He had less than a year in charge, but huge step in your managerial career. And I know that someone like Arteta, who effectively let jobs pass him by to find the right one, it was hard to know what he would say. Part of him, I'm sure, would say, you've got to pick right. This might not be the right time to go to Ajax and could do big damage to your career. But also Mikel Arteta, I'm sure people would have been telling him, this might not be a good time to go to Arsenal. There's so much work needs doing there. Yeah. What do you think? Because I mean, I would worry about that, like the experience on that coaching staff without Stuivenberg and Steve Round.
Yeah, they have to act pretty quickly to bring in a replacement. I'm sure with this sort of thing, there is always a little bit of forward thinking and forward planning involved, because these assistant coaches will go, and a job will come up and they'll take it. And someone like Albert, I'm sure they probably expected it might happen. I think coming on the back of Steve Round going as well, just a couple of months after that, there's no doubt it'd be a blow for Mikel. And I would be a little bit concerned by it, because Mikel is still a very, very young coach, and the pair of them are just so sort of connected. You see it on the touchline. The two of them, they're always there together. They're always talking. They're always discussing. And I'm sure it would be a blow. I don't think it'd be. I wouldn't look at it and be absolutely, really concerned about what it might mean to Arsenal's season. But I think they would need to act relatively quickly to get in a very strong replacement who is on Albert's level, who can sort of slot into the role that he's done very, very well. I mean, I remember for the book I spoke to Andreas Georgeson, who was a set piece coach at Arsenal in Mikel's first full season, and he spoke really, really glowingly about Albert and Steve actually, and how important they were, and he felt that they were to Mikel, the two of them combined, in terms of that they had really, really different skills. And he thinks that was, very purposely done by Mikel. He wanted Steve to do the stuff that we knew Steve did on the training ground, and that sort of whole, the guy was really kind of old school and close with the players and knew the league. And then the real sort of technical stuff that Albert did and did really well and combined really well with Mikel. And he thought that they were absolutely essential to the way Mikel was operating. And I have no doubt that he would think, if I were to ask him now about Albert going, he would think it would be a big, big blow to Mikel. So it would be a little bit of a concern, but I think the most important thing would be just to make sure that the replacement came in pretty quickly and was of Albert's level. It's very hard to stand in coach's way. I mean, you think back to Pep with Mikel. He would never stand in Mikel's way, and he said that. He went on record, didn't he? He said that if he wants to go, he wants to go. I'm not going to stand in his way of him taking a really good job. And for all of Ajax's faults at the moment and the position they are in, it's still Ajax. I mean, it's still a hugely tempting club. If that job gets offered in front of you, that would be a very hard job to say no to, surely. So I don't think he would probably look at the state of the club right now and think that's an immediate turn off. I think he would probably look at it as potentially an opportunity. You can't get much lower than where they are now, and to get them back on song. So it's definitely one to keep an eye on. I'll be really interested to see how it all pans out. But I'm sure Mikel will get asked about it, I imagine, at the presser tomorrow. It'll be interesting to see what he has to say. Is
there anyone? I mean, I'm probably kind of thinking here someone with a bit of Arsenal heritage, because
Santi Cazorla
as an assist. Because I think you maybe do need someone who has. I mean, it's hard now, isn't it? Because Arteta's got the experience he didn't have at the start. But I would want someone with a little bit of like either managerial or assistant manager experience.
I jest when I say Santi. It's just that's what everyone.
But I would like Santi too.
Everyone says it immediately. Obviously, it couldn't be Santi. Santi couldn't walk in and be Mikel's assistant on the back of zero experience, really. And he's still playing anyway at the moment, isn't he?
By all accounts, he's still balling as well.
Yeah, he is apparently. I keep seeing tweets of people who've been watching him saying that he's still balling out, which doesn't surprise me at all. So I don't know really off the top of my head about who could potentially come in. I don't think it necessarily needs to be an Arsenal man. I mean, Albert's not an Arsenal man. He's come from he's Man United and got all those links, and so I don't necessarily think it has to be Arsenal. It just needs to be someone on Mikel's level. Mikel's such an intense guy, and I don't think everyone would find it that easy to work with Mikel. And so it'd have to be someone who, is carefully selected. And I'm sure, like I said, that there would be some forward planning going on. And there would be some people that he would have in his mind to approach should something like this happen. Okay, there's a couple of questions before we move on and end this one. We are up to the hour mark now. It's one from Nicholas. I've had a few about this. It keeps talking about the way Arsenal are playing. He says, last year we looked very good while results were coming mostly this season. Do you have any concerns about the fact we haven't really played all that well, or at the very least we haven't dominated teams, perhaps like we did 12 months ago? Look, I would like to see Arsenal dominating teams. I mean, in a way, they have dominated a lot of games this season, to be fair. It's just not quite the swashbuckling football that we grew to know and love at times, certainly through the first half of last season when Arsenal just blew teams away and had kind of won games within the first sort of 10, 20 minutes at times. So, but I'm not overly concerned. I'm still looking at the fact that Arsenal, where are we? We're coming up to November. They're still unbeaten in the Premier League. They're, in and around exactly where you want to be at the moment in the Premier League in terms of the table. They're top of their Champions League group, having won twice out of the 3 games. They're through in the Carabao Cup. So I'm not worried, I have to say. And I almost like the fact that there's room for improvement this season, whereas last year, the first half of the season, there was barely any room for improvement. It was basically impossible to follow that first half of the season, because if they did, it would have been absolute record-breaking season like English football had never seen before. So there was almost only one place to go last season, but this season there's clearly room for improvement, and as the games go on, as the team gets more adjusted to playing together, as they get used to some of these new relationships that we're seeing, as hopefully players like Havertz begin to settle more, that they're just going to get better and better. And the fact that they're maybe not their best yet and they're winning games and they're not losing is, for me, that's a positive.
Plus, yeah, the football's not as sexy, but the defence is notably better. It is harder to score against Arsenal. That's drawn out by the data, and what is it? Less than a goal a game conceded. And I think Arsenal, when you can't win the Premier League title conceding a goal a game. And if Arsenal can knock half a dozen or more goals off the goals conceded column, then that should be fine, because, like you say, more time with this sort of new reconstituted 11, more time with that Saka, Martinelli, Jesus front 3, the goals should come in greater number. Yeah, I think it's all fine-ish. I'm a bit worried about Newcastle, I've got to say, because they look really good. Well, they did until everyone got injured or suspended.
No Tonali as well. That's obviously come out now that ban has certainly, they've been notified of it. I think there was some sort of paperwork or formality still to be done, you were saying, before it actually gets ratified and put into law. But the 10-month ban for Tonali has been made known now, made public. So there's going to be no Tonali, you would think. Is that right? I mean, he's not going to be playing against Arsenal, is he?
He won't be playing against Arsenal unless it get a big paperwork delay. And it sounds like no Isak against Arsenal either.
Yeah, he's out for a while, which will be a blow. Obviously, they've got Callum Wilson, who's been in very good scoring form since he went there. But I like Isak. I think he's a really good player, Isak. I look at players potentially Arsenal could sign, and I think he would have been brilliant in this Arsenal team and a really brilliant option. And like I said, last year's game at St James's was so tough. It was just, if you were there and experienced the atmosphere and that intensity of that game, that was like a full-on cup final. It was really, really intense. And I'm sure this one is 5:30 as well. It's going to be under the lights at St James's. It's going to be really, really difficult, that. Tough game. And just lastly, there's one last one I just wanted to talk about from Fanny Nkunu, who says, why are you journos, and some supporters obsessed with who is a starter and who is not? City is the gold standard, and you never know who is going to start other than Rodri and Haaland. Both Zinchenko and Tomiyasu are good enough to start for Arsenal, and that's all that matters. That allows Mikel to pick whoever is suited on the day, so this is a non-story. We must just be happy the squad keeps improving. Look at the impacts the subs have had this season. I do think, despite being called you journos,
I love it when people say
this is actually a very good point. And I guess the way we talk about it, and everyone talks about it, is just because it's football and it's opinion and it's a debate, and that's what makes football so brilliant, is that we can all debate about who should start and who shouldn't start, and who should be playing. So I guess that is why we do it. But I do get the point here that we should be happy that we've got the likes of Tomiyasu and Zinchenko, and Mikel can make these decisions, and he can look to play certain players against certain teams, potentially, like I was saying, Zinchenko this weekend, Tomiyasu next weekend, and it shows the improvement in the squad, and the squad building has been a success, even if it's not finished yet. So yeah, do you think we spend too much time debating this sort of stuff, or not?
I think within the Arsenal world, there's probably now especially since this summer, I don't think there's much obsession about who is the starter and who must start every game and what is the best 11 beyond that one position where it is really interesting in goal, because there are other teams that rotate their goalkeepers, but one of their goalkeepers isn't Aaron Ramsdale, a high-profile England international. And until such time as people aren't interested in reading or watching or listening to stories about high-profile footballers, I think people are going to talk about it. We are, hate to say it, but we as an industry are more aware than ever before of what people are interested in and what people aren't. And sometimes to a fault, even, we feed people what they are interested in, and we know. So it's true that people are interested in whether Tomiyasu should be this. And I'm not, like we've had the discussion there. It's a horses for courses approach, but there are a lot of people that want us to make statements that Martin Odegaard must not be a starter anymore, that Takahiro Tomiyasu is Arsenal's left back. I think we try and actually avoid that more often than not, but people like getting annoyed at journos.
I hope you realise this. I hope you realise that your statement that William Saliba is the laziest player in his Arsenal squad is now going to be clipped up and made into a story on about 50 different news websites, which happens all the time. Are you right? We're going to wrap up now. We're nearly at a minute. Are you at Sheffield United this weekend?
I'm not. I'm at Sophie and Max, my friend Sophie and Max's wedding. But I will be. I will be doing whatever I can. What time's the ceremony? 3:00. I will be that guy.
Will you be that guy?
Will be the guy at the back.
Well, I am in the press box this weekend.
Brill!
My first one back this season. So yeah, looking forward to that. And then what we got, West Ham on Wednesday, so probably back to Tuesday, I would say, for this next week. Makes sense. Preview. I'll be at West Ham as well, providing I get accepted. I've applied for it. I haven't got the accreditation through yet, but I think I'll be at West Ham as well. So yes, I shall be seeing you in press boxes very, very soon.
Lovely.
Cool. All right, mate. Look, thank you very much for this. Thank you, of course, everyone, for watching or listening once again. And we'll be back next Tuesday for the next one. And I'll be back. Actually, I say I'll be back tomorrow. I might not be back tomorrow because I have got taking my kids to Odds Farm. And last school day of half term. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to record anything tomorrow. So apologies.
Do it from the farm. Do it with the goats.
Do it from the farm. Do it with the goats. Do it with Dennis Bergkamp. There you go.
Yes.
Welcome, Charles Watson, the goat. All right, everyone. Have a good day. Cheers, mate. You have a good day. I'll speak to you all soon.
You too. Speak soon. Bye-bye.